What's poppin', players? Welcome back. Well, actually, welcome to the first ever Two Penny Video Game Club. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, here with my good friend and co-host here, Connor Elliott. Say hello to the people, Connor.
Hello. I did this introduction 5 minutes ago.
It's 20. Now, what Connor's referring to is this is attached to the Two Penny Gamescast, episode 102, in which you can find over at youtube.com/2pennygamescast, along with this video review and mainstream podcast services of your choice. Now, this here is something we're going to do monthly, is we're going to sit back, we're going to play a video game on the side, and we're going to come back and review it, maybe rank it against other games that we've reviewed in the series. But we thought with the release of Last of Us Part 1 incoming, we thought it'd be a good time to play, replay and re-review The Last of Us Remastered.
Now, I do want to get this ask the question out the gate. When was the last time you played Last of Us?
I played Last of Us the day before Last of Us Part 2 came out.
Yeah. I didn't know if I didn't remember if you would have played it afterwards. Makes sense that you didn't. Because you did play Part 2 again, but not what is now Part 1.
I've played Part 2, I don't know, 2 or 3 times now.
Yeah.
The first, I can't say Part 1 because Part 1 is coming.
Yeah.
Remastered, I've played dozens of times. Countless times. I was in love with this game when it came out. I got it day one. I had the bug that happened to all day one players where all of our save files got corrupted and we all had to start over. That was fucking fun. And then when it came to Remastered and you were able to pick it up along with a bunch of our other friends on PS4, you also played it a couple of times yourself, which is unlike you. You're not a big replay guy.
No, but it was a very captivating story. The Last of Us Part 2 became one of my most anticipated games based off of my experience with the first one. With the last time I played this was when the remaster... It was... when was it? I don't know. Because I replayed it multiple times, and I don't know if I think I played it like a couple years down the line afterwards. So I want to say like maybe 2018 was the last time I took this game.
Okay. Sort of in anticipation for Part 2, but not anywhere, like we weren't close to Part 2.
Yeah, I definitely didn't do it beforehand, right beforehand.
I've definitely, I've played it more than you, definitely.
Yeah.
I've platinumed the PS4 version of the game, did a bunch, we both played a bunch of the multiplayer, loved it.
It was great, yeah.
And for this here, let me go ahead and get the video playing here, just so people have something to watch. But for this here, we're just reviewing the main game. We're leaving the factions multiplayer out of it. And Connor, revisiting it all these years later, a couple more playthroughs under your belt, in a post-Last of Us Part 2 world, what did you think this time around?
Well, the game sucked me in right away. When I booted it up, when it introduced the two starting characters of the show, Joel and Sarah, his daughter, the moment that happened, when it was feeding you dialogue, it was prepping for what was about to come, instantly sunk in, and it was in the mood to play the game. I was expecting to maybe kind of like, because I had other games that I was playing at the time, wish to play those games and just get done with Last of Us, but that was never really the case. I was wanting to finish it in anticipation for the show, but beyond that, I was, always willing, just on its own merit, willing to play the game and wanting to play the game. I would think it'd work. I gotta go home, gonna eat, then I'm gonna play some Last of Us and revisit that, see how the rest of the story plays out. My estimation of this game on its own, apart from Last of Us Part 2, jumped, I guess I could say. I wouldn't say it's better than on my top 10 list of video games of all time. I wouldn't raise it any other points, but my appreciation of it is increased just because I enjoyed revisiting it and appreciating what made the game so great in the first place. And one of the things I did also enjoy was playing it now that I had Last of Us Part 2 on my mind. When we were talking about it, talking about it a lot after the game came out, I had said I wasn't too hot on it overall. I thought the writing was flawless. I saw a lot of people complaining about that, but I never found it to be true for myself. But I never was emotionally invested in that game.
Part 2.
Part 2, yeah. That remains the same, but I feel like if I were to go to Part 2 again, I would feel something because the impact of what happens in Part 2 really hit me near the end of this game. That was the big change in emotion compared to the last times I played this game, because I was now knowing the context that all of this is going to start a downhill trend of pain, suffering, all these different issues, while also adding to another well-made game, because I still like The Last of Us. I still really like the combat and the gameplay. even if the melee combat was a little bit outdated. But
a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit outdated, yeah.
Okay.
But I definitely see the big jump in quality in terms of gameplay, just raw shooting and moving around in Part 2, but most importantly in the melee combat, which just I have I guess I have a greater appreciation for that in Part 2, knowing how far it came from where it once was and able to make a fun melee combat experience off of something that didn't really have the best one. You know, they laid the cool groundworks of, you know, using disposable weapons, crafting shivs, which you could use to, you know, grab people and then stab them really quickly, all those kinds of things.
Which is a mechanic they drop in the next game.
Yeah, they drop it. But in exchange for what I would say a better melee combat experience. So as far as my thoughts on the game have advanced since playing 2 and now playing this one, I would say definitely the ending. The choices that were made were a lot heavier hitting than they had been even the first time I watched it.
They weren't light, you know, back then either,
no.
you know? So I'm with you with a lot of that there. I also, as soon as I booted it up, I was sucked right back in. Yep. Immediately, I took a bunch of notes in here. Let me pull them up. My first, 2 play sessions, I took notes. I did it in... Oops, I had TikTok open. But just like you, I was immediately enthralled in the narrative of this game. Immediately, I was into what we were doing with dialogue and subtext and lighting and environmental storytelling and all of those great things. All of those things that the game originally got praised for, there's a reason they were praised for. And a reason I've always said, I believe in terms of narrative in games, there is a pre and post Last of Us world where games before The Last of Us, sure, had stories, and some of them were good, but they didn't really enthrall you in that way until The Last of Us. And it wasn't until the first Last of Us game that I feel like that's when narrative backbone in video games really had to step up their game across the board, and to where there was an argument to be said for people who were like, yeah, I like video games because I like playing video games. I don't give a shit about the story. I skip cutscenes, all of that. I think in The Last of Us, if you skip cutscenes, you're missing the majority, the majority of the game. You're just missing the point. And I think that carries on forward in future Naughty Dog games. And I think also along with that, games in the industry as a whole. You know, you look at, your Witcher 3s. You look at your God of War 2018s. You look at even smaller games to where you don't really care about stories. They didn't start taking their narrative story, but the tone in which they took their world changed. Resident Evil 2 Remake, I think, is a great example of that. Where you look at the original Resident Evil 2 and even every other Resident Evil game in the series, they take the piss whenever they can. They don't give a singular shit about what their story means or how their characters being introduced matters or any of that. Resident Evil 2 Remake, very clearly, it's it's still B-movie horror, but just the tone in terms of presentation very clearly takes influence from The Last of Us here. And then a lot of my early notes are all focused around these ideas of presentation, acting, music. All of those are at a 10 at all times. My literal first note is acting is so good. And then the last note I took, because I didn't take notes past this recording that you see right here, is Troy Baker is elite. Because he really is elite in this game. This is his best performance by far. Yeah,
I don't think that's really in question. I mean, he has great other roles, but this is exceptional.
And then, but there's, immediately I was also, before you even get into real gameplay, I immediately started finding shortcomings in this game. And I think the age is of the game. We're 9 years deep. We're encroaching on 10 here, and there's a lot left to be desired from this PlayStation 3 game remastered for the PlayStation 4. You and I both played it on PlayStation 5s, but that doesn't matter. It's a PlayStation 4 remaster. And I should say, I played the full game beginning to end, and then I also went and played the Left Behind DLC. Did you have time to play the Left Behind?
Yeah, I stopped it when it was introduced into the story,
Into
so
the
I could have
narrative
most
and played it
natural-
there.
Yeah, which that was actually one of the other things I thought was like, man, it would have been seamless. This inclusion of this, if they'd chosen to do so,
Yeah.
it would have been perfect. It would have fit perfectly.
Yeah,
as a
and
remaster.
I want to touch back on that when we later on down the line when we talk about the remake and the necessity of the remake. But a lot of the things that like are very clearly are not aging well. Like, I mean, you talk about the gameplay, like you're still like enjoying it and stuff.
Yeah.
I actually found the gameplay to be very rough this time around. It's the first time. It's not the first time. When I played it right before Last of Us Part 2 came out, I felt it there too, where I was like, oof, this melee combat does not feel good. This time around, the shooting did not feel good at all. And there is a little bit of like having to bend to the will of the game in this game, which I do appreciate. But overall, I felt the shooting, like the sway of the gun does not feel good. And I understand there's like upgrades and things you can do to improve that. That immediately became a priority, which in that case, is there really a choice if, you know, if I'm just like, fuck it, I need to save up for the weapon sway. I need to. Like, I don't have other options. Like, I need to get this under control right now so that I can progress at the pace I want to. What difficulty did you play on, by the way?
Normal. I just kept it a normal, neutral experience.
I played on hard. Because, funny enough, that's also... I don't know if it's just because of the last time I played the game and it just defaulted to that. But, like, it was set... Like, when I hit start in new game, it just started on hard.
Oh, really?
So I don't know if that's like the difficulty that they intended the game to be played at, or ow, I just fucking hurt myself. Or if there's something else going on there. But yeah, the weapons I don't think felt good. The melee combat I think is atrocious in this game. It does not feel good to punch enemies. It does not feel good. It used to feel good to use your weapons, and especially when you attached like scissors to the end of them for one-hit kills and stuff. That used to feel really good. Now I think it leaves something to be desired. And also the spacing with you and your enemy NPC, I felt always got in the way. I found myself swinging and missing on hits that I felt like I shouldn't have missed quite often. On top of that, wow, the AI pathing in this game is ridiculous. Ridiculous. I think specifically, like, it's at its most atrocious in the beginning of the game when you're running with the crowds and you're carrying Sarah through the streets. Yeah. Like, those guys are just running everywhere. Like, and it's just a bunch of NPCs aimlessly running around. Now, I think back in the day that effect worked, and it did feel like a city tearing itself apart and humanity being lost. But now it feels like overcompensating. Like you're doing too much. You're overacting on the state. You know what I'm talking about?
And not necessarily. I didn't really see much of an issue with that. I mean, obviously the combat, the melee combat, definitely pretty solid points on all of those. Yeah. I didn't hate it like you probably sound like you did, but it definitely wasn't good, and I wouldn't defend it.
Oh, and it's just the fact that, like, the lack of a dodge, which they introduced in the second one, of any kind, like, just, like, being able to, like, I don't know, press square or circle or something and just dip to the side, like, is detrimental here. Yeah. Because, like, no matter what, if an enemy is in melee range and they take a swing, they're going to land their swing. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
I found myself even... I'll have my gun raised and I'll pull the trigger at the last second, and for whatever reason, because of how the animations work or the AI works, like 9 out of 10 times that bullet would miss, even if I was aimed correctly. Like most obviously to me was the bow and arrow, because you know the reticule changes from like this is going to be a missed shot to a hit shot. I would see the hit shot, let the arrow fly, and then take 2 hits to the face. To which I go, fucking okay, why? You know.
Oh, I always thought the bow and arrow was really only useful in stealth situations. I mean, it doesn't even kill in one hit as it does in stealth, as opposed to, you know, in main combat where you have to use 2 arrows to get them
to knock something down. Yeah, and it was just you know, different situations for different things, and then you know you have to kind of base, or you have to kind of judge. You know, I have 9 arrows. I have 2 pistol bullets. I'm going to use my 9 arrows. You know? Things like that. Which I think all of that works pretty well. You're always short on the ammo you want to be using, but you're never helpless. So I think that balance is correct. Yeah, you know. Even though they clearly cheat sometimes, and they're like, all right, he's out of ammo. Here's 6 shotgun shells dropped from one enemy. Okay, sure, thanks.
I'll take it, yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't feel natural, but it works for what it is.
Sure.
And I think a lot of this is just because the game is so old. Well, not so old, but it's aging. And I think these are the elements that are aging the most. Graphically, I think the game mostly holds up. Though the difference between gameplay and cutscene is staggering. And I think there are moments when they do the in-game engine cutscenes to where the game almost looks like a Telltale game. Like, that's how, like, clearly animated, cartoonish it looks. When they jump into the pre-rendered cutscenes that are used to emphasize the more important moments, I think for the most part, those still look pretty good. Though sometimes, depending on the lighting, they kind of almost look like Gmod fan-created CG scenes, you know what I'm talking about, that you'll see on the internet.
Those can be good-looking, though.
And those can be very good-looking, which should tell you how far the technology's come. But, you know, like, the fact that this is like a AAA game and is boasted for, you know, narrative storytelling and the fidelity of the world and stuff. And granted, 9 years later, that's not fair. But, you know, those things are starting to age and so forth. But overall, beginning to end, I think the story is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think it's still great. Something that we talked a little bit last night while we were hanging out is that the pace of this game, masterful.
It's never boring.
Masterful.
It never feels like parts go on too long. It's just...
There are
you're going
moments
on your
where it's
journey.
clear, like, it is of the era of get the player back on the stick, and they start inserting combat in moments that you don't need combat. I think specifically... when you're hanging out with Tommy and Ellie goes and runs away and you have to go to the house and stuff, and every single combat encounter is forced.
Yeah.
And we didn't need a single one of those.
I know.
Like, it could have been 15 minutes uninterrupted, no combat. Ride your horse through the woods, get to reflect on your thoughts and your feelings and stuff. Get to the house, have them blow up on each other. They ride back in silence.
Yeah.
You know? And then Joel makes his choice. I think the cinematography, the acting, the writing, all of those things are perfect. But when you, for no reason, are just, like, you're just rolling through the woods and then all of a sudden you get ambushed, I understand there's, like, an argument to be made of, like, oh, but that's the state of the world. You could be attacked at any time.
But you were chasing her past their hideout where a bunch of them were, which defeats the point of
how did she get there?
Yeah.
You know? And then, even more on top of that, it's just like, sure, that's the world of The Last of Us, but you've established that throughout the entire game.
Yeah.
In this moment, for the purpose of narrative, live the story beats out. Don't be afraid that we as the player are getting bored. And I think they're better about this in the sequel, or at least they hide it better in the sequel, where there's clearly like segments of, here's long stretches of just gameplay. Here's we're narrative focused here. And then there's moments where they're mixed in between. But for a lot of it, it's long stretches of gameplay, good segments of narrative. I think of the museum scene in Part 2, where if that scene took place in this game, you break out past the astronaut bit, and you as Ellie like sneak into the section that Joel never checked, and there's clickers there. But in the game, in Part 2 as it stands, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
You know? And I think it just plays a lot better, you know? And it makes it to where the moments where there are clickers and there are things happening, way more tense. Because there were moments of like, shit, are there clickers here? Oh, there's not. Okay, we're okay. We're okay. And then there's moments of, fuck, they're here. You know? So that's kind of disappointing for me, that I can literally see the moments where they're like, all right, combat sections to make sure the player doesn't get bored. And they're not even good combat sections. I think of that house specifically, when dudes break into the house, it's 4 dudes.
Yeah.
It's just 4 dudes.
It ends really quickly, but
why?
Interjects into a bad spot.
Yeah. Why is it there, you know? And anytime they do that, it's never one of the memorable combat sequences. I think when you first enter the city, and they get ambushed in the truck. I'm going to cut to the city. This is not the scene I'm talking about, but this is, you know, sort of just the general level. Wow, what was going on with my recording here? You know, this hotel sequence, specifically, I think is a great level. I love the city. I think it's the
Both
city
cities.
is just back to back to back awesome combat encounters.
It is, yeah.
You know, and then it's finished with such a great note of how the Sam and Henry story ends. All of that's great. You know, I think from stem to stern, there's not a bad section in this game. There's just moments where you go, "Wow, I wish they had made a different choice here."
Yeah. But this, well, I agree. The spring, summer. This was the summer, right?
This is the summer, right
summer.
here.
So definitely the best segment of the game overall.
I agree.
I would say, though, admittedly, narratively, it's probably the weakest. But it is.
But that's just because it's the part where it's the less, like, it's just not as apparent here.
No, but it does. But even though that's not happening, it does a good job of having the state of the world, as you were talking about before, shown in its best way of what you understand why, even though the QZ is shit, why people live there when you see the horror of this one, and even what happens in the winter when you have the chance of being captured and, spoilers, eaten.
Yeah, and winter sucks.
Yeah.
You know, winter always sucks. So yeah, the QZ sucks. It's like you're being, dominated by this, governmental force, but it's safe for the most part. I mean, you see in that early section, every once in a while someone will get infected and hide amongst the people, but that gets dealt with in really brutal ways.
Yeah.
But it gets dealt with. So there is some security there. You just have to give up some freedoms for that. And I think a lot of that is really, really interesting narratively. But this hotel sequence, I think masterclass, and I think this is a sequence in which the gameplay really shines because it's so focused on level design.
Yeah.
Which I think across the board, the level design is also pretty solid. There's never a moment where I'm like, where the fuck am I going?
Yeah.
I take that back. There's a couple moments in Billstown where I'm like, where the fuck am I going?
Really? Billstown?
Yeah, I think of one section in particular when you're in the suburbs and you're cutting between backyards and stuff. It's where they have, if you didn't pick up the bow and arrow where it first spawns, they have that secondary spawn location for it. That area, for whatever reason, I always get lost there.
Huh.
I don't know why.
I would just go to the left.
I just miss it. I think the way it's laid out and designed, I want to go towards the houses. And that's not where the progression is. So then I sit there, scratch my head, and go, where do I go? Oh, this is where. It's one of the very few times it ever happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, literally all of summer, from stem to stern, the second you enter the city and get ambushed, all the way to even in the sewers where you're fighting all the clickers and bloaters and stuff like that. I think all of that works.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, what a game. Really is still just a really, really good game. It's just got its shortcomings with age. I like all the crafting segments. I think the using the pills or the supplements to upgrade Joel and all of his capabilities are a cute in-world way of getting better and getting stronger and feeling like you're progressing, but I just don't know if it's executed on in the best ways. Fighting the training manuals, I think, is way better in that sense where, you find a manual and go, oh, if I do it like that, my shiv will last longer. Okay, that makes sense. But when it's like, pop some pills, now you can stab a clicker. You didn't think to stab the clicker. What are you talking about? I have to pop pills for this. You know what I'm talking about? And then, oh my gosh, as we're coming up here in the footage, the moment of Ellie coming to defend Joel for the first time, and then in that sniper segment later, those are great narrative beats as well. And the narrative of this game really holds strong.
And they're told in a very natural way because at this point you got separated from her. You're just doing things on your own, and just here's another cinematic moment that's happening. It's a pretty serious one, but it resolves in a character growth moment, character change moment.
But it also, has a very short and sweet moment where the characters are mad at each other.
Yeah.
It doesn't last too long. It lasts, honestly, it could have gone longer if they wanted to and still be acceptable. But I think what they did here was smart. And you feel for both characters.
Yeah.
You know why Joel is being a dickhead about it. One, because of his past trauma, and two, because she's a liability, and if she doesn't listen to him, that could get them in trouble.
Yeah.
But she is in the right. He was in trouble, and she saved him. So him being a dick makes her feel like shit. Yeah. So yeah, you buy into those reasons. Even better than in more recent games, like you think of the Atreus segment in 2018, where he's just a complete fucking dickhead, and you're sitting there and you're like, narratively, I understand why you're being a dickhead, but I don't relate. I don't connect. Whereas here, Ellie will throw a couple of side hand comments at you, and you'll be like, "Fuck yeah, Ellie, give it to him."
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Because you feel for her in that moment.
Yeah.
Left Behind, I think, is also a pretty solid DLC.
It was. It gave some well, I guess it was good. Don't get me wrong, but and it contextualized a line at the very end, final scene of the game.
Poetic. Let's lose our minds together.
Yeah, which made sense with their friendship and how they would want to go off as opposed to shooting themselves. But it didn't really, because it was DLC. It didn't need to be in the game. Obviously. I don't know what my criticism was going to be.
I don't either. I don't know where you're going here. I'll say for the Left Behind, I think it's actually really, really interesting from a number of different perspectives. One, I think the pacing is off in that DLC. When we cut back and forth between the two different timelines of Ellie trying to find medical supplies for Joel and then Ellie and Riley running throughout the mall. I understand you're doing it to get around these long stretches of gameplay where you're just looking at things and characters are talking, and so you can still incorporate actual combat in your DLC. I think it would have been a more interesting choice to just have a DLC with little to no combat in it at all. That's a tricky thing to wager, especially when it's such a short package. It came out as it on its own disc back in the day. It was only like $30, but $30, for 2 hours, 3 hours,
Didn't remember it being that much.
It was something like that for the disc. It was something like that. I think for just buying it, it was like $15, $20, something like that. I couldn't tell you. You could look it up for me though. I think the level design and the combat encounters in the quote unquote present day segments were awesome. Some of the best in the entire game, especially when they start mixing infected and hunters together. That was really cool.
That was.
There's multiple moments where you're like, all right, they're getting kind of close to each other. I'm going to throw a brick.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a match on this gasoline real quick, and just watch it play out.
Changes up combat encounters that don't really happen again in the series.
And it's,
really happen that much.
it allows you for one of the very few moments in the entire game. There's really not any moments like this but they're littered throughout part 2. There's moments where you go, oh, shit's happening over there. Distraction. I'm gonna just run away. I'm not gonna kill everybody here. There's no need. I'm gonna lose ammo that way. Probably some health. I'm just gonna leave.
You need ammo for the end.
You need ammo for that end
because you don't really have much of a choice.
No. Let me tell you what. I had plenty of ammo. Plenty of ammo.
Yeah, so did I.
So I think all of that's great. I think the narrative between Ellie and Riley is some of the best written dialogue in the entire game, which is crazy because it's in a DLC. I think Riley is super likable, has her own character, with her own character flaws and so forth. And I think the believability of these two 13, 14-year-old girls had a bit of a falling out, had feelings for each other, cared for each other. All of that plays. The innocence, the lack of maturity and being able to handle the conversations they want to have with each other all stands true. On top of the fact, the actors are fucking killing it. Like, they're dope.
Makes that tragedy all the more better because it is a tragedy. Going back, especially on a second playthrough, it's not good. Well,
and also because it's presented to you at the end or after the game ends, so you already know where the story is going. Yeah. But that dread you feel as they're having such a good time,
you're waiting for it to go.
And they're getting closer and closer and closer, and there's just this dread coming because you know it's gonna happen. Yeah. Which I think would make it very, very interesting to see if it was implemented in the game naturally in the remake, as opposed to a side little menu thing, which it seems like that's what they're going to do. I feel like they should just, because it's a remake, fuck it, man. And it's a game we've all played, insert it into the game as it stands now. I don't think we're going to lose anything from that. I think the surprise of the bunny moment where the bunny takes an arrow to the side and then you're Ellie and you're not sure if Joel's alive or dead, that part's gone. But I don't know. I think it would add a new twist and give the remake more purpose.
Yeah. Now that years has passed, we know Joel's not dead. We know he's not. Just let it include it in the game now. It's fine now. Time is contextualized.
I don't want it
better
as a secondary menu option. I don't want to back out of my game
because
it kills the pacing when you could easily just edit it in. Not easily, but you could just edit it in some a clever way or two and figure it out that way. But yeah, Left Behind I thought was actually a phenomenal piece of content, well worth its money back in the day, and I'm so glad that they're including it in the remastered and in part 1 when that eventually comes out. Also, very interesting ideas that they're playing with mechanically that you do see grow into part 2. There's that segment where like you lift the garage doors up and then you go and climb on it and fall down and you have to put the crate underneath the garage door. That's a very part 2 environmental puzzle. Like that's not something you see in the first game, but you do see it all over the place in the second game. When Ellie and Riley are running away from the infected, very much felt like sort of like the beginning ideas of sort of those horde chase moments that you see in part 2. Very interesting to kind of see the seeds there grow and so forth.
Yeah, more horror segment. The beginning, like obviously the game has a creepy vibe to it, but some moments were definitely scarier than others. That seems like it was kicked up in part 2.
Also grew in part 2. Part 2 is scary.
It is, yeah, legitimately scary.
And yeah, I just think overall there's very little bad you can say about The Last of Us Part 1. Or remastered, rather. It's a little old, so yeah, graphically it doesn't look that great. I don't think its mechanics are aging well, really that well at all. The shooting still works fine, but it definitely takes some getting used to, and the game practically forces you to spend upgrade points to get that weapon sway down. I'm glad there's nothing like an inventory management system of any kind. Like, you fill up on scissors, and it's ridiculous that it's like, I don't care about smoke bombs. Can I empty out the space used for sugar packets and hold more alcohol or hold more anything, bullets, anything? Why is that thing? And that's still a problem in part 2 as well. I wish, there was some more balance that I could do there. But at the same time, I'm also saying I'm kind of glad there's not more balance there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The pace and the writing of the game is superb. The pace is better in this game than it is in the second game. Which was, if you go back to our first episode of the Two Penny Games Cast, which sounds atrocious, we had a spoiler-filled review of that game, and that was my one complaint, is I felt it was too long. The narrative dragged itself out too much. Every narrative beat I felt was deserved and, earned, but it's a long game. And this one is half the size of that, and I think it's great. I think there's never a segment that goes too long. There's never a segment that you're like, fuck, I just want to get to the end of this. You're constantly working your way through it, and you feel good. Like, the level of progression feels right. I also want to touch on the wit and the levity in the dialogue, which the wit is still there in part 2. It's still very clever writing and very good writing when characters, throw quips back and forth and make fun of each other. Like, it's still there. But the levity is gone in part 2. And there's levity in this game that I don't think we talk about too often. Specifically, I think of at the end of the college segment when Joel gets injured, Ellie cracks a joke and Joel laughs, even though he's on death's door.
Yeah.
It's appreciated, like, I like it. It's cool.
Yep.
It's nice to see these characters be real characters.
Especially with how it all plays out in the end with Joel's decision to, sacrifice the world essentially for Ellie. Combined with his trauma and how much he grew with her over the course of the series, due to all of those great moments that are paced well, it just made, even though you can have your different opinion on whether that was the right choice or not, it was effective to the relationship between the two main characters.
I mean, it was
what the game's all
the
about.
wrong choice, but we understand why he made that choice. And I think there's also so much intent behind both narratives in terms of 1 and in part 2, where I think the intention of this narrative was supposed to be very satisfying. You as the player, as the consumer, are supposed to see these you see these characters be estranged and grow close, and you want them to grow close, and seeing them progress like that excites you, and it makes you feel good, and you like seeing that. And then at the end, when Joel makes his choice, you're on board because you saw all those steps, and you don't want that to feel wasted. Part 2, the intent is to be unsatisfying, and you can have a debate on whether or not you like that. I think they executed on that intent perfectly. And, in a lot of ways, I like the narrative in part 2 better. But, just on the opposite side of the coin, I like the narrative of this game better. This one's easier to consume. It's not as heavy, even though it is a heavy game. It's easy to go back and revisit, and it makes sense why this is the story we're going to tell again with the HBO show. This is why we're getting a remake of this critically acclaimed video game here, like, and all of that. Speaking of which, Connor, after playing this game, I want to talk about sort of the necessity of remaking this game. Is it needed? Do we need that? Is there something? Is there a reason beyond just, you know, a technical improvement, making the graphics prettier, for why we need that? I would argue part one will live and die in my mind on how much they change the gameplay to it. They need to tighten that shit up. They need to have... I want the melee mechanics of part two. I want to be able to dodge. I want to be able to, you know, get into a fisticuffs battle and feel like there's, like, different combos and things I can hit, even though it is really simple. Mash square, dodge, mash square, dodge. And the level of graphical change from gameplay to cutscene, if we could equate those two or bring them a little closer into each other,
which is what I think they would do.
I think that's what they're going to do too. Where, like, let's update some of these textures, some of these assets, some of these character models. Let's make it look as detailed as the cutscenes do, and, you know, update the cutscenes while we're at it as well. I think all of that is greatly appreciated. And if they just nail some good gameplay, where it's necessary, change some level design to sort of fit that gameplay. I don't know if changing the whole game from front to back is the right answer in terms of level design, but, you know, different encounters like this one right here, being able, you know, does prone. Can you prone in part one?
Yeah.
You know, hiding underneath cars and stuff like you do in part two. That'd be really interesting to see. And I think it would make for a better game. So it's, you know, I was never against the remake. But after this playthrough, I think we don't need it right now, but we're quickly coming up on a need for an update for this game. Because the further we get away, the worse these issues are going to get.
Yeah, my general thought on it is still relatively unchanged. A lot of the value I get from this, from Last of Us in general, is from the story, which I will experience the same way regardless of what they do.
Don't touch that.
Don't do it. They're not. Yes. Well, I hope they don't. But the thing with me is...
Other than put Left Behind in the middle of the game.
Yes, other than that. But as far as gameplay improvements go, well, there's definitely room for improvement, and I think they're going to execute on those improvements perfectly. I have no doubt of that. It's a question of, do I want to have to experience that again, even with the advanced gameplay? And my general thought on it is not really, solely because there's, like... If there was nothing else really out, I was clueless on what to play, I'd go for the $70 purchase, which is also the big drag for me.
That's a problem.
Yeah. I would go for
just part one story, for no multiplayer.
Yeah.
Part two is still trapped in quotes on the PS4. You know? Yeah, for $70 you could have just thrown in part two as a bundle.
Yeah.
You know?
But, you know, I would still probably pay that if I was bored and nothing really was out that I was interested in playing, and I'd like to just revisit this again, because I would like those improved gameplay bits that I'm expecting are going to come in this next game, this next version of the game. But overall, I think you can find a pretty good equal justification for not wanting to play it, while also wanting to play it. It really, I think, hinges on how much you put stock in the gameplay being better for you to get the full, perfect experience of The Last of Us Remastered, Last of Us 1, Part 1, whatever we're going to call it after that comes out. But it's just really still not for me, even after playing it. Though the appreciation I have increased a bit more. You know, a remake is still unnecessary in my mind, but welcome, as you said, because it is dated. Certain aspects of the game aren't going to be much better further on down the line, and I would want a remake at some point. I just still think a little bit too early for it right now, especially after just getting Last of Us Part 2 and already being full on that kind of content.
Yeah. No, I'd like to experience this again, but have fun playing it.
See, I still had fun playing it. So
like,
yeah,
I used to have fun playing it. I no longer have fun playing it. You know, yeah. I mean, just like structuring the game in the smaller details and stuff. I think of the deer hunt when you're hunting the deer as Ellie. There's like a subsystem in that game where you step on branches and make noise and the deer runs away. And that subsystem is in the rest of the game. If you you know, run through some trees or something and the branches catch on you, they'll make noise.
Yeah.
And you could be detected that way. But it's so clear, like, it's so clearly telegraphed what things will make noise and what won't.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can knock over a trash can and everyone be like, I don't know what happened. No, I didn't hear it. But, like, I step on a fucking branch and then everybody knows where I am in the... Come on now.
A plate is clearly laid out. And
The plates in the David fight and so forth. It's just like, all right, really? Like, you see it. You know? And as the gamer, you don't want to see it. So, like, it'd be nice to, like, hide those elements a little better. The environment, when scavenging through the environment and like you're opening doors and drawers and things like that, like the ones that are openable are clearly a different color because the lighting on the asset is different than the ones that you can't interact with. So you're running up and you're like, oh, I can very clearly open this door, and you open it and the lighting on it doesn't change as it moves through the environment and so forth. And you're like, all right, 2013, here we are. So like all of those elements I'd really like. And then just like, when you really start zooming in and you start looking at the hyper detail of everything, like, you know, I don't have it in this footage, but like at the beginning of this level where like after you get ambushed in the truck and you open up that garage door and you close it, and then there's like a pile of shoes, and it's clear like there's like a couple of shoes rendered, and then the rest is just a gray heap of what I guess could be shoes, but it's clearly like just a gray heap, like you know, like some of those smaller details being really flushed out and panned out. I think we have the definitive version of this game coming this September, and I'm excited to dig in and play and do that again. And the story is so good that even though I just played it just now, I'll fucking do it again. I'll jump right back in, and I would love to see, you know, Tess's sacrifice played out with high fidelity, and, you know, have the actors' emotional state play through a little more through the animation that, like, is still there in this game, but, like, sometimes it looks a little, like, over-animated or under-animated sometimes. You know, like, the balance is... it's never the Goldilocks of, like, that's just right. You know? So, yeah, if anything, this last replay sold me on part one more than anything else. I'm interested and I'm excited to see what they do with that.
Well, it'll come out soon. Relatively.
September 2nd, something like that. September, that first week of September or something like that. But overall, Connor, Last of Us, still classic?
Still good.
Good game. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for our Last of Us book, Two Penny Book Club review.
Nice book.
I get, you know, we toyed around with the idea of ranking games right now. Number one. Just number one game. Number one.
I'd rank it number two in preparation for the next game we're playing, which is I don't know.
We don't know.
We'll have the answer soon.
We'll figure that out. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for the Video Game Book Club. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And it's the end of the Two Penny Games Cast, episode 102. You can catch that every Monday, youtube.com/2pennygamescast, 8 a.m. Central Time, and mainstream podcast services of your choice. Come watch us play video games live over at twitch.tv/2pennygames. This Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central, I'm continuing my first ever playthrough of Sly, the Year of the Dragon. I'm sorry, not Sly. Spyro, Year of the Dragon. And, you know, come check us out. Have a bunch of fun over there. But until next time, have a great time. And Connor, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye.